Oh, sorry. We are way into the day. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us here. It's hard to feel hopeful some days about the state of what is confronting us and the many, many stark reminders that we see from all around the world on this front. 30-day streak over 110 degrees in the southwest of the country. Air quality here in our city and throughout this region that is affected by wildfires. In the city of Boston, dealing with decades of deferred maintenance on city pools and infrastructure as not only a recreational issue, but now a clear public safety and public health issue. We are used to, I think in some ways desensitized to the breaking of records when it comes to heat and storms and the alarm bells on climate change and the devastating impacts that are making swaths of our planet unlivable, causing climate refugee movements and needs in areas across the city, especially in environmental justice communities. Since my kids have been born, we have been watching year after year the heat records get broken, and they just turned 6 and 8 recently. And I know this month, as we're concluding July, is set to be the hottest month on record in 120,000 years on the planet. So our window of time is short and closing. All the projections about 2050 or decades from now, we might as well be talking about something that doesn't exist. And so wherever we can, at whatever scale is possible, we have to be accelerating those deadlines and doing whatever we can with all that we have today. This executive order is a long time coming. It is dealing with what is fully within the city's control in terms of public buildings that will be newly built or undergoing a major reconstruction and renovation, and committing that they will be fossil fuel free. We need to do everything possible in the city of Boston, not only to protect our own residents and communities, but to set the standard across the country and beyond for what action can look like with the urgency that is getting close to what our residents deserve. And I want to emphasize that this is a major undertaking. It's many, many school buildings and public housing units and boilers and appliances, and that is part of why it has taken us until this point in our administration to be sure that we could deliver right away. We didn't even want this to be something that is signed while several major renovations were already ongoing that would then kind of sneak through. But we wanted to go back and even ensure that the major building projects in process now would also comply with and have the processes so that they can meet this standard, and we're not building things now that we have to retrofit shortly after. So I want to thank the entire team for all of their work. It's been an intensive and collective effort. Most of all, I want to thank our residents and activists and advocates who have been at this for a very long time and are continuing to push on all fronts to make sure that Boston can lead. Speaking of action at the city level, I couldn't be more excited to welcome and thank the new Chicago mayor, Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is here with us today. And I don't know why she's standing over there on the side, but our city councilor and chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, City Councilor Kendra Lara, who's been a key part of all of our efforts on this front as well. This is what gives me hope, is that there are cities around the world, but around the country, who have real heft, who have real scale, whose actions will make a real difference. And we were so excited to see the election results come in my city of birth, to see the leadership that Chicago will have, and look forward to working together. Do you want to say a word, Mayor, while you're here? Come on up.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor Wu, and to all of you who are here this afternoon. It brings me tremendous pride and joy and humility to know that the leadership here in Boston is setting an example of what real leadership has to look like in this moment. In order for posterity to have a shot at real sustainability, the actions that we put forth today will ultimately provide that type of security, as Mayor Wu has already articulated: health security, economic security, job security, housing security. I mean, these are the pathways that we have to continue to create in cities across America in order to make sure that our economies, as well as, of course, the people who make up these great cities, not only have support that they need, but the ability to be able to live freely, and particularly in an environment that is healthy. I will just say this, that I'm so impressed with the velocity of your leadership. I know sometimes it does feel like government moves a little slow, but if you think about the birth of this particular city, Chicago was 186 years old. The fact that you've been able to do it in a year and a half, and I'm in my week 12, no one should judge this mayor about her ability to actually move with expediency, because what you did in a year and a half, it took other folks a lifetime to figure out. So congratulations to your leadership and to the team. I don't know all of you by name, but as a mayor, I certainly appreciate what you all do to bring people together and to get the work done so that your mayor can continue to smile. So she's smiling, which means you're doing an effective job. So thank you again and congratulations.
Great. So I think we're going to end up going right down the line. I'll pass it over to our Green New Deal Director, Oliver Sellers-Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor Wu. All right. Thank you, Mayor Wu, and thank you, Mayor Johnson, for the kind words. You also have a wonderful team in Chicago with Angela Tovar and everyone who's doing amazing work in Chicago. So I am Oliver Sellers-Garcia, Green New Deal Director for the City of Boston, and what Mayor Wu will be signing very soon is an executive order that requires all new buildings and renovations that are city buildings to be fossil fuel free for heating and cooling, hot water, and cooking. That means no more fossil fuel combustion that causes greenhouse gas emissions, reduces air quality, and locks in polluting infrastructure. I think what's really special about this executive order is that it is a perfect example of Mayor Wu's all-of-government approach to climate action through the Green New Deal. We recognize that decarbonizing buildings is a huge challenge, and what this represents is really looking around and finding where we have different tools across the city and using them to accelerate our action there. And city facilities play an enormous part in that. This executive order recognizes that as the owners of 380 buildings with 16.5 million square feet, we have an important role to play. The other element of the all-of-government approach is that we really are turning our city agencies into decarbonization delivery mechanisms. And what we're doing here with this executive order is that the Operations Cabinet is putting the pieces into place so that all of its projects are really actively advancing our climate imperatives. And so how do we do this? With a very clear target of zero fossil fuels, with planning, with a facilities condition assessment and the wonderful work that BPS is doing with the Green New Deal for public schools, with investment from our capital plan that funds fossil fuel-free projects, and also with this executive order that puts in place the very clear standard and the process for doing this. So what we're doing here is we're very intentionally empowering different agencies across the government to find where they are uniquely positioned to deliver on decarbonization and taking advantage of that. I just want to mention two other things about this executive order. One is that it covers major renovations. It's not just new buildings. New buildings are the exciting thing to talk about, but as you've heard us say over and over again, most of the buildings that we have now are the ones that are going to be around in 2050 and obviously in 2040 and 2030. We've got to work with what we have. The other thing is that I want you to keep your eye on what these projects are going to look like over time, because it does represent a change. It's not just swapping out one piece of equipment for another. It means that we're going to have to think of different ways of implementing some of these projects, and that's a good thing, because benefits such as a tighter envelope also bring energy efficiency and air quality benefits. It's all part of the same thing. So in closing, I just also want to thank our partners here in the city, Operations has just been absolutely wonderful. Leading on this, Chief Dion Irish and his deputy, Morgan McDaniel, who you'll hear from in a minute, the Public Facilities Division, Property Management Division, the Environment team, Capital Planning, and BPS all have really come together to sort of, we set ourselves a challenge to make this work, and it's really a wonderful result here. So I'm delighted to pass it to Morgan McDaniel, Deputy Chief of Operations. Thank you.
Hey everyone, pleasure to be here today. I'm Morgan McDaniel, Deputy Chief of Operations. I'm standing in for Chief Dion Irish, who couldn't be here today. The Operations Cabinet is so happy to have collaborated in drafting this executive order. It was built with the expertise from our Public Facilities Department and Property Management Department, which is so important because they're the ones who will be implementing the nuts and bolts of this executive order in their work every day moving forward. The city is already investing in beautiful fossil fuel-free buildings, and we're really proud of that. We have new builds coming up that are fossil fuel-free, like the upcoming Dorchester Community Center, as well as renovations converting from fossil fuel to electric, like the Irving School. The FY 24 to 28 capital plan includes over $130 million for projects that will comply with this executive order and advance decarbonization. Every new build or renovation project is designed to serve the people of Boston for decades and decades to come, as Oliver said, which is why it's so important that we act now and don't replace boilers with gas boilers, but build in fossil fuel-free equipment for the future. We have an incredible team in the Public Facilities Department with expertise to carry out this executive order and take on all of the challenges that will come with it, as well as facility directors and managers and departments across the city. So grateful to have such a great team. And we're really proud to make this commitment to build buildings that are healthy for our residents, our employees, and our city and our planet as a whole. So thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Hassan Faruki, who is the Advocacy Director at Boston Climate Action Network.
Thank you so much, Morgan. So when this building, Boston City Hall, was built, the architect, Don Lynn Linden, said, and I quote, "Boston City Hall carries an authority that results from the clarity, articulation, and intensity of imagination with which it was formed." And I think today we're in another moment where we need to bring clarity and imagination to how we build all of our city's buildings. And so it means we've got to imagine every building as being more than just a place where you go to work or you go to study, but as a piece of our climate justice plan. And that means every single one of us has got to be involved, and including every city agency. So that's why this is really important. Buildings really matter. All of us are doubtlessly sure that 70% of our city's greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. We've heard this a million times. This is 1,000,001. And that's why we at the Boston Climate Action Network have long focused on buildings, from the passage of community choice electricity to pushing for a stronger building emissions reduction and disclosure ordinance, to what we do today, pushing for green and healthy Boston public schools. And the schools really matter too, because when you look at all of the city-owned buildings, 2/3 of that square footage belongs to schools. So this executive order is, in my view, the biggest step forward that we've taken in making sure every one of our public schools is fossil fuel free. So that is a big deal. And so we are deeply grateful to Mayor Wu for your leadership, and to our partners in the administration, our partners in the council, and to all of the organizers who have laid the groundwork for this for decades, particularly on the education front, the Boston and Massachusetts Education Justice Alliances, Undaunted K-12, Mothers Out Front, the BPS Families for COVID Safety, the Massachusetts Youth Climate Coalition, the Boston Teachers Union and their Climate Action Committee, Build BPS Coalition, Sunrise Boston Youth, the BLS Youth Climate Action Network, and so many more. To every single person who knocked on a door, who made a phone call, who talked to a neighbor about the importance of this issue, to every person who voted in a municipal election, this moment is made possible thanks to all of that work. And we got to keep it up because we're only getting started. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all of you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendra Lara, and I am the chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Environmental Justice, Resiliency, and Parks. Today is a momentous moment, as is all moments that have to do with environmental justice with Mayor Wu. She has been a champion since she's taken office in the last 2 years, and a great partner in this work. Mayor Wu detailed in her remarks about the impacts that we were seeing, not just in our city, but all across the country. And one of the things that I know is that those impacts are not felt the same in every single community. And so this order today is not just a commitment in building a more resilient Boston, but it's a commitment in racial justice. And it's a commitment in ensuring that the communities who are going to be most directly impacted by the impacts of climate change are going to be at the center of all of our decision making. I got my start as a community organizer with Alternatives for Community and Environment, doing toxic tours in Roxbury. And so I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of the other organizers that are here with us today. I know that it's taken decades of work, a lot of organizing, and a lot of political education to get people to understand the impacts of climate change on our city. And we are blessed to have a mayor who is willing to listen and do the work that it takes to make sure that we're a city that's going to be resilient in the face of climate change. So thank you again, Mayor Wu, and thank you all.
Any on-topic media questions before we sign?
Can you talk about a few projects, near-term projects that would be affected by this new executive order?
Two of the, well, Morgan, I'm sure will have more examples, and had mentioned the BCYF project, the Grove Hall Community Center. The two biggest and furthest along Boston Public Schools projects are the Carter School and the Quincy Upper School, both having been in the pipeline for some time. The Quincy School now approaching its decade mark of being in development. We want to speed up all those processes, but with this one, it was actually a good thing that we could get in right at the end and make sure that that one will be fully meeting these standards as well. But what else am I missing in terms of major projects?
Sure. So our Boston Public Schools projects are huge and a huge portion of our capital plan. So things like Madison Park are obviously projects that we're really proud of. We're also building many new fire stations, police stations, EMS stations that are upcoming projects in our capital plan that are fossil fuel free. Libraries as well. And I do want to mention that Boston Housing Authority has $50 million in their capital budget for fossil fuel free retrofits, which is pretty fantastic.
If I can say a word, just to connect some of the dots that Mayor Johnson and the councilor and other folks have said already, we're doing this to help avoid some of the worst harms, many of which are evident already, and especially in the disparities across the city. This is also a chance in doing so to bring so much opportunity in terms of economic prosperity and the pathways that will be here for our young people and for our residents. And so we are working, for example, in the school and public building redevelopment plans to work on a project labor agreement with our unions and with labor as well, so that all of these jobs will be not only sustaining for our residents, but also contribute to greater representation in who is on these work sites, and directly connecting those pathways and being able to open up some of the programs that have been put in place to ensure direct connections from our residents to these very important segments of the workforce. We're also very much intending that all of the work around vocational and technical education with Madison Park will feed right in. Every single initiative we can connect at Madison Park today, we are already doing, whether it's the 20 electric school buses that are pilot, that we first started in a pilot program, that are being serviced by a new program at Madison Park with our high schoolers, or some of the opportunities that this will open up as well. Our Power Corps program, for example, young people from the city who are learning about now multiple tracks in resilience and green space management, in HVAC systems and energy efficiency. All of this is intended to create opportunities at every scale for our community members.
Can you talk a little about, it's wonderful what this city, Boston, is doing, and you're an instrumental part of it. If this were a city, and I guess I'm saying, it's so imperative that the word gets out, and is it out, that every city and every country has to participate in this in order for this thing to work?
Yeah, if, Rich, by this thing you mean our very survival and existence on the planet, I completely agree. We are past the point in time where this can happen comfortably and conveniently. If action had been taken decades ago, when the science was already there demonstrating the impacts of human man-made actions and corporate actions and the destructive impacts of climate change, we would have a different set of options in front of us. At this point, we are in rescue mode, we are in crisis management mode, and we're doing everything we can to address multiple crises at the same time, of racial disparities, of health and well-being, of jobs, and this moment in our economy coming out of the pandemic. And so, in fact, this is exactly what we need on multiple fronts. As a coastal city, it is even more dire and urgent. We see what it, going to the tip of Florida and touching that 100+ degree water, we are already seeing, even just over the weekend with more intense rain and storms that Boston is experiencing, our storm drains need significant work to even be able to absorb this new kind of intensity of storms that are becoming the norm in Boston and the flooding that creates. And so we're working on multiple fronts at the same time. This is about everything we can do within the city's footprint and our municipal action, while we're also doing emergency preparedness, while we're also working with the Green Ribbon Commission and our largest anchor institutions on every front, just to all at once, everywhere. And I also want to recognize someone who is, as usual, hiding in the back when she should be up here, our Commissioner of Environment, Alison Brizius. Thank you for all that you do as well.
Are there plans to address projects that are already underway as far as getting them to comply at a later date?
Yes, so as I mentioned, the school projects that are furthest along will have we've already made some of the changes in the design and appliance purchasing and kind of the finishing touches so that they will be in compliance. Are there others besides the BPS examples that are in the queue?
Yeah, so we did have a few projects that were just too far along for it to make sense or be prudent to turn back and completely restart the project. However, we are doing everything we can to set those projects up so that they can be converted in the future.
What do you mean by that? How are you doing that?
So doing that by setting up, I'm not the expert here, but setting up the electrical systems, envelopes, et cetera, so that it will be less costly to convert later on.
Are the developers on board with that as far as compliance?
So for our city projects, for buildings that we own, we are the owners. Our public facilities department manages the designers and the construction. So we make those decisions.
For an individual green building, does transferring to green energy look like an individual building is producing its own energy, or is it like a bigger infrastructure issue?
Well, it's both. Do you want to talk a little bit about this, Elder?
Sure, yes. It's a good question. I think it's obviously a case-by-case situation. Some buildings will be able to be, energy sustaining, but I think the big takeaway that I'll say with broad strokes is that Boston is a dense city, and we are realistically going to have to take renewable energy from the grid, and that has to be a sort of regional effort. So I think every building has a responsibility to be as efficient as possible and to be able to use only electricity and not have any fossil fuel combustion, which is what this executive order is for city-owned buildings. But purchasing renewable energy complements that, and that's what we have to do in cities.
I'll give an example just to get a sense of how we're really trying to do everything, whatever form it can make sense to move. We want to support the private sector or other anchor institutions as well. So I don't know if you've seen BU's relatively new data science building that looks like all the books stacked up together. That building itself is actually powered by a well that is a geothermal well that is below ground 1.5 times as far down as the building is tall. It's a really a pioneering energy source that we are, have had a great partner in Boston University to really focus on, and they have other projects that they're trying to do in terms of renovating dorms, et cetera, that will similarly kind of break ground on that front. We also, there's parts of the cities along the Longwood Medical area is on its own kind of energy system there that if we can switch that over, then that whole, high energy consumption area would be on a different path. There's efforts around compressed heat with steam to even retrofit the existing fossil fuel mechanisms. There are certain companies working on this in Boston as well. We're trying to do what we can in the short term while also thinking about the grid in the long term. The more chargers we have, the more buildings that are all electric, the more we're going to have to work closely with all of the anchor institutions and the utility companies in where the siting of more capacity will be for the grid. That's something that we're confident as technology continues to improve and as the city is creating all of these new jobs that we'll be able to do well. Okay, all right, so any of our advocates and community members, feel free to come on up and we can sign this.
Get down to the center.
Anyone else want to come in?
Guys, photons. There's cameras behind you.
Okay. Nigel, you good? You want to come in? Me? Yeah.
I came all the way from Chicago to see you.
Tell us when, Mike. You good?